party in that, which surprised virtually everyone. The case is set to be heard on March 31st, hopefully a decision by mid-June. The lower court decision was not stayed, so it is going into effect. In that decision, the federal judge in California essentially ruled that the NCAA violated antitrust law by setting national limits on financial aid for student athletes. She's recently increased the cap for potential academic or graduation award student athletes from $5,600 to almost $6,000, and that simply adds to the potential costs of the decision. There's no real indication where the Supreme Court is going with this case. There's a lot of speculation, but not sure anybody really has a good idea. And it will potentially impact the next issue I've been briefing you on, which is name, image, and likeness. The NCAA, the last time we talked, had planned to change their rules in January on this issue, and they delayed that action, choosing to wait on the Supreme Court opinion in the Alston case. Our law in Florida, as you recall, goes into effect on July 1, as does a new Georgia law, and that means the NCAA will have a very narrow window in which to take action on name, image, and likeness after a June decision in the Alston case, but before July 1. They probably will not hit that window, which will put all the D1 schools in Florida in a difficult position. But we will follow Florida law, I assure you. So I am working with the AD at the University of Florida to organize the D1 athletic directors in the state to plan for that eventuality, because he and I feel strongly we all need to be on the same page on this one. As you recall, this change in policy would involve allowing student athletes to use their names, images, and likenesses to promote their own businesses and be compensated for the promotion and advertising of other commercial products or services. They could receive compensation for autographs, compensation for teaching or coaching, basically private instruction in certain circumstances, raise money through crowdfunding for expenses not covered by institutional aid, and use the services of agents for name, image, and likeness purposes. We anticipate under the proposed NCAA scheme that all these activities would have to be disclosed to an independent third-party record keeper. So we are proceeding with the procurement of a vendor to do education and content creation for our student athletes, because this is becoming a big recruiting issue, as we've already discussed, and we have to get someone on board. We're being very careful, though, about how we go about this, because it's still not clear what services we're actually going to be able to provide. The third issue I've been discussing is the undergraduate transfer issue. This too was deferred in January by the NCAA after the Supreme Court took the Alston case. We still believe the NCAA will adopt the one-time undergraduate transfer provision. I think that will probably happen in April. But when the Justice Department sent the NCAA a letter suggesting that they thought the proposed rule had antitrust implications, that caused the NCAA to take a step back. It's not clear, given the new regime in Washington, D.C., what exactly a letter from the outgoing justice folks really means at this point. But I do think that that will happen. I would like to talk for a minute about the transfer portal. There's a lot to unpack there. So Sports Illustrated has done some research, and basically their data indicate that since August, around 1,500 football players have entered the portal. And roughly a third of those are walk-ons. So 2/3 are scholarship players, and of say 960 roughly scholarship players in the portal. Around 560 are Power 5 conference players. Of the 960, 60% are still uncommitted and are looking for a place to land. Of the roughly 560 Power 5 conference players, 300 of them have committed to a new school. Of those 300, 60%, or roughly 180 of them, took a step down in level, going to a Group of 5 school or an FCS school. So clearly, many of these young men are finding that the transfer portal is not going to meet their dreams. This is the equivalent, basically, for them of playing a game of musical chairs with far fewer chairs than you have players. The hidden damage, though, in my view, is to the high school student athletes. Remember, this year's freshmen were all granted an extra year of eligibility, and so they will be freshmen again. And when you combine that with the freshman class that was just signed, you're looking at many schools of a freshman class this fall of potentially 40 to 50 student athletes. That's going to create a bubble that will impact how many scholarships schools can grant in the future as that bubble moves through the next 4 years. When you combine that with the fact that, as Coach just said, many schools are reducing the number of high school athletes that they sign in order to save scholarships for transfers, it becomes very clear that the impact on the high school students in terms of scholarships at the Power 5 level is going to be substantial. And that's not an aspect that's gotten a lot of attention to this point. With regards to our budget, we continue to grapple with the deficit. We continue to try to cut expenses. We've required 2 weeks of furlough for the vast majority of the staff in athletics, and we may have to require 2 more weeks of those in the higher salary ranges before the end of the fiscal year. We're also looking at using some of the coaches' restricted accounts to finance operating expenses this fiscal year on a one-time basis. On some other issues, Coach alluded to the dead period. On Wednesday, the NCAA extended the dead period until May 31, which just further complicates his recruiting issues. What happens after that will be announced theoretically by April 15th. There's a lot of concern about camps this summer, for example. The Football Coaches Association has asked the NCAA to address the issue of faked injuries during games. This has become a real problem, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the NCAA addresses that. Our football pro day at FSU, by the way, will be March 22nd. March 22nd. On the spring sports front, we have 13 teams right now ranked in their top 25 in their sport nationally. I think we've got excellent shots at national championships in soccer, men's track and field, and beach volleyball. In addition, both the golf teams, tennis will be very good, particularly women's tennis, as will baseball and softball. Men's basketball, well, you saw what happened against Virginia, which got a lot of people's attention. If they continue to peak and they can avoid injury and further COVID issues, they've got a real chance. Certainly to make the Final Four, in my view. They're very good. As I've told you before, attendance will be very limited to spring sports contests, so if you want to come to any of those contests, please plan in advance carefully. Let us know if you're coming. We'll try to help. The ACC has hired a new commissioner, Jim Phillips, who was the athletic director at Northwestern University. He's received rave reviews from the athletics directors in our conference, and certainly reading the literature in athletics, it seems to be universally regarded as an excellent hire. He's very impressive, very high energy, very bright, and he certainly has his work cut out for him with us, given our revenue situation. So looking forward to working with him. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Athletic Director Coburn? Vice President Coburn?
That takes some getting used to.
I've got one question. When you and Michael were here in November, you talked about how booster membership had dropped down to the 9,000, I don't remember, the 9,000 range. I know we were going to make a concerted effort to try to turn that tide.
Michael?
Is there any report there, any success there? We were at 9 something.
I think I'll let Michael take that one. He's making progress.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, sir.
Michael Alford,
Thank you, Chairman.
CEO of the Seminole Boosters.
Well, we just kicked off our One Tribe campaign, and we're at 48% of our goal. We set a goal of 13,000. If you remember, at one time, we were over 16,000, and we had dipped to about 9,400. So right now, we're about just under 50% of our goal. Just started. We're pacing ahead of where we thought we would be. We have added over 1,000 new booster members who are not members last year. So that's a great accomplishment by our staff of going out and just telling our student athlete stories and making sure that people understand that the annual fund goes to support the operational funds of the department, but more importantly, it allows us to provide leadership and educational opportunities to those student athletes. So people are hearing the vision, and they're stepping up to us. More importantly, what's interesting is towards the goal of pledges, we're 63% to our goal, which means that people who are currently members are stepping up their contributions to us right now. So they're also hearing the message and stepping up their contributions to the boosters. So far, just early start. It's off to a great start.
I would say it is. 1,000 new members on February the 19th, and you started after the holidays. I think that's a great start. Well, that's great news. A lot of good things are happening. And Peter, to your point, that a lot of people aren't waiting to be. I know Coach is willing to earn it. Michael's willing to earn it. Vice President Coburn's willing to earn it. But if you love FSU, you support it. People are stepping up. So that's great news. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in closing, I would say that Michael has been a real pleasure to work with, and there's no question in my mind that we made the right decision there. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Why don't we take a little break? It's 10:20.